When we spoke to Dr. Jenny Johnson, we asked her to reflect on these behaviors.
I think that for someone whose mind goes to the idea that stealing a baby is even an option, and even a viable option, I think that it makes sense that they would have either in the past or in the future engaged in other types of behaviors of deceit or, manipulation or even just lying. I think that it's kind of all in the same realm. Of course, stealing a baby is a little different than writing a bad check, but it's all kind of in that same idea of seeing their own needs as more important than that of society around them.
Whether they're worried about maintaining a relationship or pleasing a partner, time seems to play a major role in the decision to kidnap babies. One might think that kidnapping is the desperate alternative to adoption or fertility treatments, which are often prohibitively expensive. But those paths take time, and by the time an abductor is on the hunt for a child, that is the last thing she has. She has often told friends and family and a partner about an impending birth, and will play out the pregnancy until the last possible moment, putting off the repercussions of the falsehood until she is out of options. This is clearly seen in the story of our final Grady baby, a newborn boy we call Baby Y. His name and the name of his juvenile mother were kept out of the press. His kidnapper, only 15, was tried as an adult, and her name was released to media, but we've chosen to omit that here. After all, she still lives in Atlanta. Like all the other abductors, she did not respond to our interview requests. With the event 22 years in the past, the only references to the crime must be dug out of news archives, and we can't blame her for wanting to keep it that way. But this story is important, and we need to tell it, because as of spring of 2018, Baby Y was the last baby to be abducted from Grady. After his kidnapping, security measures finally and seriously changed.
A great beach has a lot to offer in the way of relaxation. The sounds, the views, the feeling of the sand and water. But one more thing that could relax you is the knowledge that you paid less for that experience by booking with Beachbound Vacations. For a limited time, we've not only lowered prices across our site, we also guarantee that our prices are $200 less than our competitors, or we'll make up the difference. Enjoy this introductory offer today and get one step closer to your perfect beach at beachbound.com. Terms and conditions apply.
It's getting colder outside, and that means it's time to take advantage of incentives on high-efficiency gas heating equipment from National Grid. Because nobody wants to experience a breakdown in the middle of winter. If your equipment is getting older, think about making the switch to a newer model, because saving energy means saving money. Exclusive incentives up to $1,200 are available now for energy-saving furnaces, boilers, and more. Learn more at ngrid.com/NYC-gas heating.
Want to get 7 streaming services for the price of 1? Sign up for a smart bundle that'll stimulate your brain. Featuring Curiosity Stream with the best documentary films and TV shows, Nebula for thought-provoking content from your favorite creators, and One Day University with the best lectures from the country's top professors, and so much more. It's perfect for families with all kinds of interests and great content for kids. It also makes a perfect holiday gift. Now at 40% off, get all 7 services for only $3.50 a month. Sign up now at smartbundle.com.
It was June of 1996, less than a month before Atlanta would host the Summer Olympics in a city that had been sanitized, beautified, and reimagined. It was 5 weeks before the bombing in Centennial Park and all the chaos that followed. Many downtown residents had been displaced when the Atlanta Housing Authority tore down Techwood homes in preparation for the Olympics. This was considered necessary as the housing project was one of the first landmarks visitors could see when they drove in on I-75. Most Techwood residents couldn't afford the new mixed-price housing that replaced the project, and they scattered to Carver, to Capitol, to Harris. Harris, that's where Alexis lived in the summer of 1996, when she decided to take a bus to Grady Memorial. When you imagine the kind of teenager who'd take a baby, you wouldn't picture Alexis. She hadn't had any trouble with law enforcement. A friend of the family described her as a sweet, quiet girl who had plenty of problems at home and who preferred to spend time at her boyfriend's house, where things were more stable. Alexis had not had an easy life, and the family friend didn't want to get too specific, but it seems that most of her problems originated with her own relatives. We don't know why she told her boyfriend that she was pregnant, but that's the story his family heard too. She was a small, slight young woman, and they had a hard time imagining that she could be carrying a child. Then again, they didn't have reason to doubt her. Eventually, there was no way around it. Alexis needed to produce a baby. Her relationship wasn't in trouble, but the lie had gotten too big. Like the 6 abductors before her, she made her way to Grady. Alexis may have been the most brazen of them all. She entered the maternity ward, and she discovered a doctor and a baby boy upon whom he'd just performed a circumcision. She told that doctor that she was the baby's mother. After receiving aftercare instructions for the circumcision, she took the infant and simply walked off the ward. And that lie held. When the kidnapping was reported to police, they originally said that the biological mother of the baby, also a juvenile, had been the one to remove him from the ward without authorization. You see, that biological mother was in the foster care system herself. The AJC reported that there was no relationship between Alexis and this juvenile mother. As far as the police knew, it was a pure crime of opportunity. They reported, quote, "The child's mother, who is 17, is in the custody of Fulton County Department of Family and Children's Services," said the spokeswoman Sharika Osorio. Quote, "We hadn't even had time to think about what we were going to do about the baby when this all happened." Alexis took the 2-day-old infant back to her apartment at Harris Homes. It's unclear what occurred that day. But by that evening, her mother had called police to report the infant's presence in the house. According to the AJC, Alexis told her mother that she'd found the baby in downtown Atlanta. And that's the story she stuck with, even after she was arrested. Before police could get a full statement from her, Alexis actually escaped custody and went on the run. APD declined to elaborate on how the teenager managed it, but she was gone for 2 days. She was eventually found by a police informant who, under the ruse of taking her somewhere safe, got her into a car. Atlanta police were then alerted and she was taken to juvenile hall. There, Alexis told a strange tale. She began with the assertion that she'd found the baby, but then moved into a story that sounds like our modern understanding of how trafficking works. That a teenage boy and girl, both of whom were named in media reports, had forced her to steal the baby. She said that she was driven to the hospital at gunpoint and told that she'd be shot if she didn't retrieve an infant. It took the police weeks to unravel this story and finally prove it false. At this point, Alexis was named in the paper and was eventually tried as an adult for the kidnapping. An APD officer was quoted as saying, "We've discovered that this little girl is a chronic liar and deceitful for one so young." And that's indicative of the kind of press she received. That statement, though, doesn't jibe with the story we got from those who actually knew her. She was obviously troubled, telling both neighbors and friends that she was pregnant, and then committing to a kidnapping to keep the story going. But why? We asked Dr. Jenny Johnson to reflect on the relationship between motivation and mental health.
I think that, it's easy to just boil down and say, oh, they must be a terrible person, or, oh, they must be a psychopath, like kind of what our always go-to is when you do something terrible. But there really could be a lot of reasons that someone would do this, and it's a lot more complex. For someone who may be mentally ill, if it's someone that is acting on a delusion, or, a false belief because of their psychosis, or even a grieving mother. These can be a lot more complex. It could be that they believe they can care better for the infant. It could be that they're wanting to keep their partner around. It could be that they're not fully in touch with reality. And whether that's some sort of a dissociation in that desire for the baby, or whether because they are actively psychotic. It could also be, some kind of untreated mental health needs related to trauma from losing a baby, or, the intense anxiety of potentially losing a partner, or some kind of personality disorder that's really affecting the way that they interact with others and think about things. So in everyday life, people find inappropriate or unsafe ways to meet psychological needs. I think we can all think of at least one person in our life that does something really weird or bizarre or even concerning in order to meet some kind of psychological need that they have. And unfortunately, this is the way that some of these people have chosen to meet that need. It's egregious and it's intense, but, it often will come from deeper down. Now, not always, but oftentimes deeper down, and a lot more complex issue going on with why they want that baby. It doesn't make it okay. It doesn't make it right. And trying to understand why someone does it doesn't excuse the behavior. But I do think that there's a lot more to it than simply like good and bad for a lot of these cases.
Viewed from afar, Alexis's choices fit the common pattern and line up almost perfectly with studies on abductor motivations. She doesn't, however, show the kind of planning that most hospital abductors do. It seems that the older the kidnapper, the more sophisticated their approach. Alexis impersonated the child's mother, and we've seen that before when Janquia Brooks' teenage kidnapper first tried to take a baby, but it's not the most common scenario. Carlina White, and her name might be familiar to you as there was a movie made about her life, was taken by a woman dressed in scrubs. In fact, she sat with Carlina's parents and actually comforted them as the baby was admitted to the hospital at 5 days old for a fever. And as soon as she had a chance, Ann Petway took Carlina and disappeared. Petway and Williams, sophisticated kidnappers, were significantly older than most of the Grady abductors. Perhaps it's not a surprise that these sophisticated adult kidnappers are also the most successful. Raymond has never been recovered, and it took Carlina and Kamaya until adulthood to discover their true identities. Grown women plan. Across the board, the teenage kidnappers of Grady babies snatched and ran, right back home to their parents' houses or to the houses of friends. There was no way to truly hide their crimes. NCMEC describes kidnappers as likely being from the area where they abduct, and the Grady disappearances support that. But the story of Gloria Williams gives us pause. She purposefully drove out of state to commit her crime, which made her incredibly hard to track. So, would it make sense that the most successful kidnappers might do the same? Even if they were from Georgia, taking the babies over state lines would exponentially increase their chance of success. We've learned that media and the public play vital roles in locating these children, but when the abductions only make the local news, a Georgia woman who was fled to, say, Alabama or North Carolina might just be safe. We've talked about these kidnappers' motivations, but we haven't spent much time considering how they deal, emotionally or practically, with their crimes. When Gloria Williams was sentenced in the kidnapping of Kamaya Mobley, she addressed this. Here's an excerpt from the statement she gave before the court.
That's when I told her. I started crying, and she was like, "What's wrong?" I said, "Sit down, I have to tell you something." I said, "Sit down, I have to tell you something." And we were outside on the front porch. And I told her, I said, "You're not my daughter." I said, "I took you a long time ago." And she didn't understand. She, what are you talking about, And I guess when I started crying, that's when she, this is not Mom. This is not her. Something's wrong. Something is truly wrong. And it was just too much. And I told her then, and she still didn't believe me. And I got on the phone and I punched in some, websites, I guess. And I showed her. She said, "That doesn't look like me." And I said, "Yeah, that's you. Miss Mobley. Mistaken." I've wanted to apologize to you when you were in South Carolina. I pray every day, for the good Lord to renew your hearts, renew your minds, and to heal your hearts, and to give you the peace and joy that comes from knowing His Word. I can't explain where I was back then, 20 years ago. I know I wronged you, and I'm so sorry. So many days. So many days. I just want to pick that child up and say, come on, let's get in this car and go. I just couldn't. When I left Jacksonville, I didn't look back. I didn't know what you went through. I could only imagine what you went through. I could only imagine. But I never in my life meant to hurt you, meant to hurt either one of you. God knows I didn't. God knows my heart. But I did hurt you. And for that, I'm so sorry. And I know I can't give you back the 18 years. I know that. If I could, I would. If I could give you a new heart, Miss Mobley, I would. If I can give you a new heart, Mr. Aiken, I would. But I can't do that. I don't have the power or the authority to do it. I know you hate me right now. And I know you've heard what people said about me. But I done something wrong. And this is probably the only thing I've ever done wrong. And I hope one day that you could ever find it in your heart to forgive me for what I've done to y'all. I don't know what more to say. But I wanted to reach out to you before this. Because I know you was hurting and I know you wanted answers. You know, I just kind of prayed that you'd come down to the jailhouse to see me or whatever, to ask. Because I would have told you, even though my attorneys told me not to. I think if you had come that far, I would have had to tell you. But I'm so sorry. And I tell you, I hurt you. I hurt Mr. Aiken and your families. And for that, I'm deeply sorry. I'm so sorry.
Mrs. Williams, do you acknowledge that Kamai Mobley, Alexis, has been hurt through the situation as well?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
That statement is little comfort to Shanara Mobley, the mother of Kamaya. When she gave her victim impact statement, she said Gloria deserved the death penalty for her crimes. And she described the immense loss she'd experienced, how she'd become suicidal, how the kidnapping had totally shifted her personality and perspective on the world. It's hard to guess as to how much of this pain Gloria Williams recognizes and how much responsibility she truly assumes. Donna Green, the mother of Raymond, kidnapped in 1978, has spent a lot of time thinking about Lisa Morris, the woman who stalked her and stole her son. She discussed her feelings in an interview with my co-host.
I was angry at Lisa for a long time, very angry at her, and I do think about her. I used to imagine that maybe she would die and on her deathbed tell the truth. Did she still have him? Because according to what the police told me back then, they believe he was sold overseas. So, but I was very angry at her for tricking me, and I was angry at myself for being naive. But yeah, I thought about her, but over the years, I've forgiven her. And I didn't do that for her. I did that for me, because me being angry at her, it festered in me, and she's not worth that for me. So I forgave her, and I pray that one day, if she's still alive, that she whatever she know, if she gave Raymond away or whatever, that she tell the truth, that somebody tell the truth.
Would you say that was a conscious decision on your part to forgive her, or do you think it happened over a period of years?
It definitely happened over a period of years, because all I went through it because of her. So to me, forgiving her was, it wasn't even an option. I wanted the worst for her, in the worst way, because she took she took a jewel from me. So over the years and the Lord working with my heart and working on my mind, and the things that I've been through, I understand the depths of forgiveness and what it does to you. Because when I forgave her, it released me, and I was able to be free to live a life not chained down. He broke those chains that had me bound, because me angry at her and hating her, in my heart, it was just black for that hate, even though you seen one thing on the outside, but on the inside, it was something else going on totally. So because me hating her made me also not trust myself. So I released that, and it took time, took prayer, but I have peace with her today.
Donna is an incredibly resilient woman, but not all parents manage this level of resolve and strength. And we can't expect them to. Donna's own husband, Raymond Sr., never truly dealt with the loss of his son. Donna describes how Raymond Sr., fragile and in and out of addiction, managed the long-term effects of his son's disappearance.
Go nowhere or do anything. He didn't trust anybody. They always had to be with me or him. He was definitely very, very connected and close to them, but I know all that came from, because I was the same way. My kids told me one time, it's like you smothering us, like you just on the inside of us won't let us breathe. But I was coming from a place. So I didn't know how to, if they went to the store, in my imagination, if they was 5 minutes late, all kind of stuff is in my mind, and I still have to deal with that today on some things. If I call a few times and they don't answer, then, my daughter didn't answer one day, and I called the police and asked them would they check the road. She was like, "Are you kidding me?" But that's just stuff that I deal with. I'm better with it. And Raymond, he really didn't get better with it. He always had different things. It was always a bad scenario for him, So we deal with it the best we can.
Kidnappers themselves have faced wide and varying consequences. Many women are institutionalized for weeks or months before trial or sentencing. For the nonviolent offenders, as all of the hospital kidnappers were, there is no standard punishment. One juvenile is tried as such, and another is tried as an adult. Louise Lett, Shantae's kidnapper, served 5 years, and some of that time was for forgery of the birth certificate. Carlina White's abductor is serving 12 years, and at the time of this podcast publication, Gloria Williams, Kamaya's kidnapper, had just been sentenced to 18 years in prison. The hospitals responsible for the baby's safety have also dealt with repercussions. We told you about Grady's payout to Tavish Sutton's mother, who received $600,000. Kamaya Mobley's family won $750,000 in a similar suit, and Carlina White's parents won the same amount. That's a big hit, and the result has been a major overhaul of hospital security procedures, systems, and drills. Staff regularly participate in Code Pink rehearsals to assure that everyone on shift understands the steps that should be taken if an infant is abducted, with the goal being to stop the kidnapper before the infant is missing. That is, when the child is still on hospital premises. As early as 1995, some hospitals were installing maternity ward systems that cost upward of $50,000 and included swiveling cameras, alarm bells, and extra security personnel to oversee them. Now, procedures are even more stringent. Families all wear security bracelets that both confirm identity and, in the case of infants, contain security sensors that will trigger alarm bells. The most advanced systems include GPS trackers that will help security and police locate stolen babies as they move through the hospital and beyond. Elevator controls, systems to automatically lock down floors, and tamper-resistant bracelets are now the norm. Still, drills continue to show the weakness in security protocols, not because hospitals aren't preparing. Rather, it's impossible to imagine every possible scenario that might occur. That's why repeated practice runs are so important. Hospitals and law enforcement cannot underestimate the motivation of a kidnapper and that kidnapper's ability to zero in on the most vulnerable hospitals, county facilities that serve uninsured populations. Security systems are obviously essential, but so are adequate staff and enough support for nurses and solutions in place before the problems occur. And with hospitals like Grady facing regular, serious budget cuts, how will this be possible? Grady itself has not suffered an abduction since Alexis stole that baby boy in 1996. But nationwide, the crime still occurs, and NCMEC continues to offer tips in order to minimize these abductions. They recommend that you take a picture of your baby within 2 hours of birth and that you request a copy of the footprints that the hospital generally produces for its own records. In addition, they caution that you should always have the baby in your line of sight, even when you're using the bathroom. You should also be careful when you make birth announcements. Include minimal information and don't put them online. Everyone, hospitals, parents, NCMEC, is working to make things better. Because at the heart of the thing, we're talking about women and infants at their absolutely most vulnerable, who deserve to have and believe in our protection. Angeline Hartman, Director of Digital and Broadcast Media at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, underlined how vital safety in hospitals is when she spoke to us about all the work that NCMEC, hospitals, and other organizations have done to improve situations for all mothers and babies.
But I remember doing an interview about the recovery of Kamaya Mobley. And the reporter asked me to kind of put it in perspective. And I thought, hospitals are supposed to be a safe place. Think about that. A mother has just given birth. And this is a beautiful moment that she's sharing with her newborn baby and her family. And to think that someone could come into a hospital, into that safe zone, and actually abduct a baby. And it was happening all that time back then. That's just horrifying to think about. So now to hear that there were 0 abductions at a healthcare facility last year, that's amazing to me. But it's really, really turned around. But, I just think you could have just anyone can imagine it. And you don't have to be a mother to imagine that feeling. For mothers across the country, sure, they know it doesn't take a lot for any mother to remember that moment. It's so emotional. And I mean, even now, just now, I'm sorry, just thinking about it, as a mother myself, I cannot imagine what that would be like. That is a precious, beautiful time. So it's everybody's job, not just a hospital. It's everybody's job to do whatever it takes to make sure that families are safe, most especially infants in hospitals.
If you have any information on the so-called Lisa Morris, who kidnapped Raymond Green in 1978, or on the unnamed woman who abducted Tavish Sutton in 1993, we urge you to contact Atlanta Police. You can reach them at 404-546-4235. Next time, on the last episode of the season, Lost and Found. We hope you'll join us then.
A great beach has a lot to offer in the way of relaxation. The sounds, the views, the feeling of the sand,